Joining me is Labor Transport spokesman Anthony Albanese, who was the Gillard government's chief negotiator with the Independents and Greens MP, who then held the balance of power in the lower house. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be with you, Andrew.
Look, dealing with people like Rob Oakeshott and Tony Windsor must have been a doddle compared with dealing with Clive Palmer. How much damage do you think this man could do to Parliament?
Well, it's a chaotic government, Andrew, and what we're seeing writ large is that Tony Abbott had a plan to get into government, but he doesn't have a plan to govern. The sort of skills that made him a very effective opposition leader, being able to stick to a script, have those three-word slogans, he's finding don't equip him very well to be an effective Prime Minister. And that's why we see the government's struggling to find a narrative, struggling to get its agenda through of its budget of broken promises. And we're finding out pretty quickly that Australians are now all seeing that government isn't perhaps as easy as Tony Abbott and the coalition thought it was. OK,
well, that was your free kick, but the question was about Clive Palmer. What do you think this bloke's agenda is? Is it to destroy the government?
Well, Clive Palmer certainly likes being at the centre of attention. But Clive Palmer, of course, is a creation of the coalition. He's a life member of the LNP, and I note that he still appears in the Queensland branch's latest booklet for their conference as a life member. Tony Abbott was so negative and created, I think, a feeling of distrust of the major parties. And so people voted for minor parties, but Clive Palmer or some of the other fringe parties that are now represented in the Senate. Tony Abbott has to deal with this. This is a reality.
No,
this is the parliament that the Australian people gave him.
Yeah, but I want to go back to Clive Palmer. We've got it, OK? You think Tony Abbott's all stuffed it up. But I want to talk about Clive Palmer because the future of the parliament depends on what his real game is. Do you think it is to just, help the government run things better, or is it to destroy the government?
Well, Clive Palmer himself has said that one of his objectives is to destroy Campbell Newman and the LNP in Queensland. He also very much clearly likes being at the centre of attention, and he's very effective at it. We see the rolling up to Parliament in the various exclusive cars in order to get a bit of publicity. I thought the Al Gore stunt gained significant publicity, and of course on Thursday, instead of the coalition being the centre of attention, I think Clive quite liked the idea of coalition ministers coming essentially and genuflecting before him, trying to get through their policy. And what was extraordinary is that Clive Palmer on Thursday was given such a free kick. I mean, here he was proposing amendments that I don't think even his own party knew exactly what there were. I mean, there were differences between him and Senator Wang about what the detail of these provisions would be. Certainly the Labor Party wasn't party to those negotiations. You had ministers coming in the corridor and signing off on amendments to what is very significant legislation. So Clive Palmer's first part of any agenda, I think, is him being at the centre. And on Thursday, he was at the centre. He'll be at the centre again this week. There's a suggestion that tomorrow the government will move the Palmer amendments in the House of Representatives. Well, how humiliating from a political party in the coalition that used to carry on like the world was going to end if ever we had negotiations with the crossbenchers.
Oh, that's a slightly different issue. That was about whether negotiating a deal to get into government. But listen, about this, the government must now, I think, be considering whether a double dissolution down the track, an early election, is the way to go. And I'm wondering how prepared for that Labor is. Can I start with the carbon tax? Now, Labor this week voted with Palmer against repealing the carbon tax, and at the last election you promised to terminate the tax. Why did you break your word?
We didn't break our word, Andrew. We voted for exactly what we said we would do, which is we would get rid of the carbon tax but replace it with an emissions trading scheme. See, we understand that the science is in on climate change.
I saw
That's
Kevin
right,
Rudd stand there. I will terminate the tax.
And replace it with an emissions trading scheme. We can't afford to have no policy on climate change. We think the science is in on climate change. And what's more, not only are we not climate sceptics, we're not market sceptics either. We want to harness the power of the market through an emissions trading scheme to use that to drive that change through the economy.
All right, talking about that emissions trading scheme, the IPC scientist Professor Roger Jones estimates that at the very most, if global warming theory hasn't been exaggerated, your carbon tax or an emissions trading scheme to achieve the same effect would cut the world's temperatures by 4 thousandths of 1 degree by the end of the century. Is he right? 4 thousandths of 1 degree?
Well, Andrew, what we know is that 95% of the scientists believe
I'm asking you about that calculation.
Climate change is...
I'm asking you about that calculation. Is he right? Would your policy achieve a cut in the world's temperature by the end of the century by 4 thousandths of 1 degree?
Well, Andrew, what we know is that we need to act on climate change, and the best way to do it
is that so hard to answer, Anthony?
Mechanism.
What's so hard to answer about that question? You're asking Australians to pay all this money. What's the answer to this question?
No, Andrew, I'm not asking Australians to pay all this money. What I'm asking for is for the power of the market to drive through change through the economy so that we drive down emissions.
To what effect?
Australians know that 2013 was our hottest year on record.
I find it amazing. I find it amazing that you guys make Australians pay billions and you can't even tell us what all that pain actually achieves, and you dodge the question repeatedly.
No, I don't,
All right,
Andrew.
well, tell me how much difference.
What we're seeing is that the rest of the world is acting, and that's the wrong question, Andrew.
No, that's what you guys always say. That's what you and Tim Flannery always say.
No,
pay all this money, we don't know what it'll
Andrew.
achieve, and if you ask what it'll achieve, you say, oh, wrong question. But listen, Labor's also...
That's not right,
Senate,
Andrew.
It's true.
Climate change is real, and we need to act on it.
Yes, OK. Labor in the Senate is now helping to block savings of more than $40 billion over the next 4 years. Do you guys plan to announce $40 billion of alternative savings to compensate?
Well, Andrew, the coalition added $68 billion to the deficit when they made their mid-year economic forecast at the end of last year. They gave away savings that were there, savings to ensure that companies in particular don't offshore their tax benefits, savings in terms of the very high end of superannuation, and at the same time they are making a position whereby they have a new tax to pay for the paid parental leave scheme.
Look, I'm against that too, Anthony, but that wasn't my question. My question wasn't about Abbott's parental leave scheme, which I opposed to. My question was, you guys are stopping $40 billion plus of savings. Are you going to announce alternative savings, or are you just happy for the budget to blow?
Well, what I'm saying to you, Andrew, is go back and have a look at the savings that we announced in the economic statement done before the election was conducted.
Yes, you're actually opposing
year.
Those very savings in the Senate. Right now, $5 billion worth of them.
Well, Andrew, what we're not opposing is the changes that we put forward in terms of superannuation, the changes that we had in terms of making sure that companies paid their fair share of tax here in Australia and just didn't offshore it. What we're opposing is the expenditure such as the paid parental leave scheme. We have a responsible position to put forward. We'll be putting forward, as we did at the last election, all of our costings fully there whenever the election is held, Andrew. So we're ready to go. Don't worry about that. Look, we are absolutely ready to go.
Well, we'll see about that, but I wonder whether the election might be earlier than people think. Anthony Albanese, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad you've had the guts to come on. A couple of people, like your leader, won't. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Always happy to be here.